Hi there, I'm Rebecca and a really warm welcome back to my channel, created by Rebecca. In this week's video, I'm going to be turning an 8-inch wreath, a big pile of felt, and some found acorn caps into a really fun autumn decoration that incorporates almost all my favourite types of crafting. Let's get started. So we're starting out with this 8-inch wreath. Size and material doesn't really matter, this is just what I happen to have. And from that lovely pack of felt I cut a selection of leaf shapes from all the different colours. So there's sort of oaky ones, and then there's smaller, almost little sort of shrubby type leaves, just a mixture. Then I'm going to add some wire, and I'm just simply applying some hot glue where the main vein of each leaf would be. Quickly applying a piece of wire, this is all 0.6mm wire. Squeezing the felt around the glue and stem so that it encapsulates the wire stem and also gives the leaf some shape. Here you can see I'm adding 2 leaves to one stem, so I've popped one at the very top, and then I've applied the glue slightly to the side of the second leaf so that it can sort of pop off to the side. I'm also going to make some little felt berries. I did this by making a very long triangle. I applied some glue to the short straight edge and then pinched that around some wire. Applied some glue along the length of the felt and then started to wrap it tightly around itself. I had to stop a couple of times and add more glue because it was cooling before I could finish wrapping, but you end up with this almost little bead shape, and it's attached to the wire stem really securely. I did try applying hot glue just to the end of the piece of wire and then poking that into a pre-made little berry, but that wasn't as secure. Any overflow of glue on the edges can easily be trimmed off with scissors, and in fact you can sort of almost give the felt a bit of a haircut to smooth the shape of the berry. Darcy very kindly brought me in this acorn cap, which was in fact the starting point for the whole project. It was so perfect. I wanted to try and make some easy felt acorns. I didn't want to try and do any actual felting because I have seen beautiful felted acorns. I thought I would try and sort of by cutting and sculpting create an acorn-esque shape. Because this will ultimately get glued onto the wreath, it won't matter if I've got seams or creases, so long as I have at least one smooth face. So I tried various shapes, and this one actually probably was the most successful. Almost looks like a strange gingerbread man with some extra flaps cut into the side so that you can sort of glue it round in a progressively tight little shape. Quite hard to explain, but you do that on both sides, and that almost makes like a little bucket. In that bucket I put some of the offcuts of felt just to sort of pack out the bottom. I regularly check the size of the acorn to the cap that I want it to fit, and then once I'm sure that it's going to be about right, I can start to fold in the top sections over the top of the little bit of felt stuffing I put in, and this will add not only to the filling, but it will also start to create the shape of the top of the acorn. I'm just using my fingers while the glue is warm inside there to help shape that acorn as much as possible. You can buy special silicone finger protectors, but I haven't. Perhaps I should. In hindsight, felting using wool roving probably would have been easier, but this is what I decided to do, and actually it is pretty effective. Adding some more hot glue to the top just to pinch it in a little bit more, give it a bit more shape. Checking the cap again. And then applying a generous amount of hot glue into the acorn cap. It's quite deep, and my acorn is not going to sit very far up into it, so I want to make sure that I'm going to get a really good secure bond. Make sure I've got the nice face of the acorn lining up with the fun little bit of the cap where the stem connects, and there we go. And then I go off and I make lots of those. Now we're on to the polymer clay section. I said this was going to be lots of different crafts, didn't I? So initially I am mixing together some white and a little bit of a dark brown, and I am just trying to get it conditioned and blended. I could have put this through a pasta roller or used a rolling pin for polymer clay to try and get this moving quicker, but actually it was such a small piece I just thought it would be easier to just do it by hand, and it came along quite quickly. This particular colour came out quite pinky, so I made another batch which used Ecru as the base rather than so much white, and it gave me a better colour. So I've just made some little wire stems, and I've turned a circle at the top and turned it perpendicular to the stem, so that's going to give me something to sit the cap onto. So I want to make sure there's a bit of polymer clay going up into that so that I can use a Sculpey bacon bond to be able to actually bake the cap onto the top. And I'm going to be doing that separately. So the first job is to get the stems made, get them looking the right shape. So I actually did a full bake of 30 minutes for the stems, and then I went on and made the caps. This is pomegranate, a bright yellow, and also a little bit of that dark brown again, just to dull the colour. Although none of the colours in the felt are particularly natural, I wanted to try and make the little toadstools as close to natural as I could. Now I've got a bit of unconditioned white polymer clay, as I've literally just cut it straight off the block, and then I'm using my clay knife to just cut it really, really finely, like chopping herbs, just chop, chop, chop until I get tiny, tiny flakes of white. I take a little piece of my mixed cap colour, pop it in the palm of my hand, and I've got this ball-headed tool that I'm using to just sort of roll the cap around in my hand and create the shape. I have got some slightly bigger ball-ended tools, but I didn't want the shape to get too big too quickly, so I actually found that using the smaller ones worked out quite well for me. Then I'm taking some of the stem colour, just enough to fill the cap. And then combining them, pressing them together with the ball tool. Adding some detail with a silicone modelling tool. I'm using the smaller end of the ball tool just to press a divot into the bottom of the cap. Now I'm adding some Bake and Bond from Sculpey. And then with a little bit of just moving around, I can put the cap on top of the stem. Remember, the stem is baked and cooled by this time. The cap is not, that's still raw clay, and I'm adding those tiny little bits of white that I cut up. And that's going to make those pretty markings that make these so obviously toadstools. Now I didn't condition this clay because I wanted them to have some texture. I wanted them to sort of stand away from the red cap. Although I'm using a silicone tool to make sure they are pushed onto the surface, I'm not trying to flatten them completely, and some of the pieces are minute, but they add so much detail. Then I pop it into some squished up tin foil, and that's how I'm going to bake them, so they're all nicely held apart. So we're getting really close now. I've got lots of bits gathered together ready. This is one of the slightly more complicated stems that I'm trying to build here. It's taken me a couple of goes to work out what I want to do with it to get it fixed. What I've come up with is, instead of just having this sort of wing pattern, which is a little bit like this, a sort of softened triangle, it needs to have a little pad behind it. So we're going to actually add glue almost onto the pad and then squidge that up onto the wing shape, and that's what's going to lock it into place. And to get the felt onto the wire in the first place, it's just simply a case of working out whereabouts you want it to be, and then very gently using the wire to create a hole. You could poke a needle through if you wanted to, just to get that started. But you want the hole to be, oh there we go, you want the hole to be as small as possible. So really I found just using the wire to push it on was the easiest and best method. And repeat the same with the pads. We have the pad in position. I'm going to pop glue onto the very top of the wire, pop the leaf through via the hole that we made, but I didn't really want it to look flat like that, so I just dabbed another tiny bit of glue onto the top and a quick squeeze. You could also use felt glue, but I don't think it would help you make sort of sculptural shapes, and you'd have to leave it to dry for a lot longer. Push the next leaf on and get it out of the way, and then bring your pad up to the point where you want the next leaf to sit. Pop some hot glue onto the pad, bring the new leaf down onto it, and with a little bit of a pinchy squeeze you can bond them together. That gives it some dimension and it makes it hold onto the stem, and it hides any ugly glue. If you feel like your pad has got a little bit too misshapen, you can always trim little bits away with scissors once it's all cooled and dry. We get the pad where we want the leaf to sit, apply the hot glue, bring the leaf down onto it, and pinchy squeeze. I made this gate with really simple methods and materials. It is lollipop sticks, and then I cut bits of lollipop stick down to make braces, and have those on both sides, and then a single one on this side that goes diagonally. Then I managed to make these really thin bits of stripping from other cut down bits of a lollipop stick, and with a couple of bends and some glue and holding it, I managed to make these sort of straps that hold a latch in place. And again, this is just another little bit of lollipop stick. It's got a rounded section just because it happens to be a bit off the edge of a stick, and I've just slipped it in with some glue, and that holds it in place. And it looks like one of those latchy things that you get on garden gates. I then glued some felt onto the gate just above and below the braced section, and made out of some 1mm wire these little hinges. That's the word I want, hinges. And I'm just going to simply use hot glue to secure them onto the felt pad. I'm going to get glue squishing through, but you know, it's fine. I'll be fairly generous with my hot glue. These aren't actually going to be functional hinges. While I was messing about with the mushrooms, I thought I'd also make some little sort of berry clusters, and these can hang down in amongst leaves like that. They don't need to be anything particularly wonderful. These are just sort of several colours of the polymer clay mushed together so that they almost look like they're starting to ripen. Lots of different sizes. And then just before they went into bake, I used my little nippers here, my wire nippers, to just sort of create a little X at the bottom of each one, so that sort of looks like where the flower was before it became a berry. I baked them on the wire, but actually they shrunk away from the wire, so I then had to come in with some E6000 glue and just glue all the berries back on. Twisted them all up into little twiggy shapes, and then they will be ready to sort of wire in amongst all the other things. I have to say I am very proud of the mushrooms and how they turned out. Really pleased with those. So let's start thinking about how we're going to put this together. Here's the 8-inch wreath. I have made sure that this is secured in a nice position, and I want to make sure I remember that is the top. I've got some of this little picket fence. Now I did buy this from eBay, I think. It's come from China. You could make your own with lollipop sticks or coffee stirrers and some wire. I've done that before for fairy gardens. And you want to take a piece that is going to be long enough to stretch right across the back. The door is going to sit within that space. And then we can start adding things. So first things first is to cut off the length of this that I want. So I want at least one bit behind there, and at least one bit behind there. The gate needs to go on next because it sits in the foreground compared to the fence. And the reason I made them quite long, so it was one piece of wire which I folded in half and then took the ends and just twiddled them round. And the reason I kept them really long was so that I could push the wire into the wreath and sort of help secure it like that. So that looks about right to me. Just want to make sure there's a decent blob and that it's starting to sink in amongst the twigs of the wreath. But not so much that it starts to show through on the front face. And now we can start adding all the other handmade decorations onto the wreath. I'm going to start with a little sweep of leaves across the bottom. While we were out scavenging for acorn caps, I also came across some fun pieces of wood. I think this is probably a bit of old fence that has been replaced. And I also got this lovely fallen twig with lots of lichen and stuff on it. I thought that was scrummy. What I've been able to do is break some bits of the old fence post off, and I'm going to sort of be inserting them to partially fill this gap. I don't need to try and fill every section of this gap. I got things that I'm going to be tucking in here, but I do want to lessen the gap. So even just these 3 pieces is probably enough just to fill enough of that gap, and then anything that's going to sit over here will sort of disguise any more gap. I've added another sweep of oak leaves across the top, almost mirroring the ones at the bottom. Then on the side by the gate, I'm using my more hedgerow shaped leaves to make it look like it's part of a hedgerow. So most of these are pointing down, maybe slightly out to each side. Also adding in some of the berries that I made out of felt, and you'll notice I've also added felt leaves to those. And then my little stems, my brother thinks they look like eucalyptus, so yeah, that's quite nice, but that wasn't my intention. And I'm taking the wire stems out through the back of the wreath, wrapping them round each other to help secure them, and then feeding the ends back inside the wreath. That way there's no pointy bits poking out at you. Then I'm making up these little groups of toadstools. I'm going to end up with 3. 1 each side and then 1 in the middle. And they just bring this wreath to life. I love it. Now I'm going to start placing the acorns. So plenty of hot glue on for this. Remember to pick your best side to face out from the wreath. And just make sure they are really glued on firmly. I'm trying to mix up the colours and sizes, but it looks lovely and random. And then just for fun, for a bit of extra natural look to it, I'm also gluing on some empty acorn caps so that I can utilise those as well. And then after much debate with my husband, I agreed to paint the gate white. I liked it as it was, but apparently it looked too much like what it was made from, lollipop sticks. And there we go, there's my autumn wreath all finished. I love that it's miniatures and nature and fabric craft and polymer clay all mixed in together. It's so fun. Do let me know if you have a go at something like this too. Now let's go and take some photographs of it outside. Right, well that's it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to me here on YouTube. And until next time, bye.